Well, welcome back, everybody. This is Pucks from the Pine Tree Pod. I'm your host, Benjamin Kennedy. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Happy Saturday night. Hope everybody's enjoying the weekend out there. Of course, we are coming off the heels of the NHL Trade Deadline from yesterday at 3 p.m. And man, it just didn't disappoint, did it? It was just activity and drama all the way up till well after 4 o'clock as news continued to trickle in. We've had so many of these deadline days over the last few years. They've just kind of fallen flat, when a lot of teams get their work in early, get their trades done, and, people spend the money. But of course, this year with all the parity in the league, so many teams kind of still in the thick of it, still thinking they have a shot at the playoffs. It really delayed things right up to the very last couple of hours. So it was an awesome day for the NHL. A lot of happy fan bases, a lot of not so happy fan bases, and then some that are a little bit mixed in terms of how they're feeling today. So I want to take some time today and go over kind of not in super big depth detail of each team, but just take a quick peek at each team, give them my own draft grade. I actually haven't prepped this yet. I'm just kind of looking through, puck peating all the trades and all the transactions and kind of an off the cuff grade for each team. But how you feeling? If you're a fan of Colorado today, if you're a fan of Dallas, how you feeling today? How you feeling if you're a Florida Panthers fan today? We'll talk about Boston, but hey, you Bruins fans, how are you feeling today? I'm one of you. I can tell you how I'm feeling. We'll get into it, but just a wild, wild day. Um, Before we dive in, of course, yesterday I did have a live stream going during the day. I went for about right around 4 hours. Had a few things to do in the evening. Came back, sat down to take a look at the video just to make sure everything was good. Um, and man, the audio file on that whole 4 hour live stream was just garbage. Don't know what it was. I don't know if it was internet issue. I don't know if it was a software issue. I don't know if it was me just being an idiot. I don't know. I've done some other testing today to make sure that my mic was working fine and everything tested out all right. But if you happen to listen to any of that live stream, I apologize that the audio was just very in and out, up and down. Um, Talked to a couple other podcasters about it, and just really kind of hard to know what it could have been. So many people do live streams with no problem using the same software I do, but it was a very deflating night going to bed. I stayed up until I don't know about 1:30 this morning trying to figure it out, and whatever. I'm keeping it out there. If you want to check out some of my reactions as those trades came in, but it was as a podcast, it was a very deflating moment to go back and see how just choppy and awful the audio was on that whole 4 hour video. So again, my apologies. Learning curve for me. I haven't done a lot of podcasting, and I'll take it as a lesson learned for myself to do a little bit more with just audio and prep check before I I get things started. Well, let's dive in. Going to start with the Pacific Division and the Anaheim Ducks, a team that I've been really impressed with this year in terms of their how they're trajecting with their young players. They're starting to figure it out, starting to be a harder team to play against. Again, they're not winning a lot of games, but they're winning a little bit more, I'd say, than they did a year ago. And based on how some of these young kids are developing, I figure like in a couple of years, they should be, a playoff team for sure. I don't know if they'll be a cup team in 2 years, but they're on the right road. Looking at their day, they do pick up Oliver Sillington from the Islanders, who had been in part of a previous trade. I'm trying to think of that trade. That must have been the Colorado trade. I think that was the earlier Colorado trade where he comes over and then goes right back out to Anaheim. So they pick up a depth defenseman for future considerations. Really, the big trade for them is they move off of Brian Dumoulin, of course, Biddeford, Maine native, going out to New Jersey. They get the young 19-year-old Herman Traff. and a 2025 second round pick. And that's really the big ones there. They do pick up Billy Huso from Detroit earlier. That's back into February for again future consideration. So a little bit of a salary cleanup there for Detroit. Um, yeah, those were kind of their big moves. So they weren't nearly as active as I thought. Of course, there was a lot of talk about Zegers, perhaps, which there always is, and Zegers never moves. I think he's just going to be in Anaheim forever. And of course, John Gibson doesn't move either. The goalie banged up, a little bit hurt. You'll wonder if he wasn't hurt, you know, would they have tried to move him? Would there have been more of a market for him? But I don't think they had to do much. They're not trying to win now. They're not trying to get a ton of futures because they've kind of got their young nucleus. So I'm going to give them an A minus on this one. I think they did just fine. Uh, didn't have to really do a lot. Not a lot of urgency. And yeah, I mean, Seacrest could have moved, but you have to have a market for him, and maybe there just wasn't a market there for him. Excuse me. My cough is getting quite a bit better, but I'll probably have to hit the mute button a few times here. So we're going to move on to Calgary, and I don't believe they were very active. I'm just going to make sure, pull them up here. A Calgary team that, again, been a little bit of a surprise how they're kind of sticking around the wild card. I did not give them much chance at all being a playoff team this year, but they're playing hard. They've got some veteran guys that have a lot of pride in that room, and they're sticking right there um, in the conversation. Yeah, they were very very quiet on draft day, or not draft day, on trade deadline day. Of course, they had made the move earlier with Philly. You're going back for Farabee and Frost, so that was kind of their big move. But again, they're not really, yeah, I'm sure they wanna make the playoffs, but I think probably their GM is sitting there thinking, "We're not gonna spend a lot of assets to try to just get into the playoffs and get destroyed by, by Winnipeg or, Dallas or Vegas or whoever you had to play." Um, so they were kind of just a, moment, not really clearing out any cap space, not bringing in anything else. So, I mean, I'm gonna give them a C, not because it was bad or anything, but just not very active. So give them a C there. Let's go take a look at Edmonton Oilers, a team that has been really struggling, since the Four Nations, and a little sleepy, I would say. Um, and just I'm always a little bit surprised by. I don't know why I'm surprised by it. I mean, they usually do this at the start of the season, and they did that. Um, did that again. But now they, kind of sleepy coming out. McDavid's having a good year, but below his standards, as we know. So that's a little bit tough. But still, I mean, 80% of McDavid's still probably the best player in the league, right? So they do pick up Jake Wallman on the day from San Jose, move out a conditional first round pick, and Berglund. So Wallman, decent defenseman, and an area I'd say of need um, for the Oilers. Um, Wallman is, does have a year left on his contract, so you do get him for next year, $3.4 million cap hit. And of course, before that, they went out and picked up Trent Frederick and Max Jones um, from the Boston Bruins. And of course, Freddie right now is a little bit beat up. I don't know if he's played yet, but he's on, of course, an expiring contract. And this is really a situation for Edmonton where they needed some physicality, needed some size. And, Freddie has some skills with the puck. He can be a good third line center or wing for you. Yeah, bring that physicality. Max Jones, more of a fourth line depth guy, but also a kid with a little bit of size um, and can throw down if he has to. He has actually one more year left on his contract, just $1 million cap hit. Let's see, I think that was really it for them. Yeah, they went out and they addressed specific needs. Um, didn't go out and go crazy. Of course, you do have to give up the first round conditional pick there to get Wallman, but you needed defenseman. Definitely needed physicality. So address some needs. Didn't go crazy. Not trying to recreate the wheel. I'm gonna give him a B minus. That's my gut reaction. All right, let's go take a look now at the LA Kings, another team that was, kind of sort of sleepy, I'd say, on the deadline day. Not a lot here. They did pick up Kuzmenko from these darn pop-ups from Philly. Give up. Let's see here. Yeah, third round draft pick. They get a seventh rounder as well. So future third round 2027 pick. So not a big price tag there. Of course, Kuzmenko. You know, yeah, this potential has always been there, and still can't kind of figure it out. Wasn't doing great there in Philly. $5.5 million cap hit. Um, yeah, I mean, you'd like LA to maybe have done a little bit more here to flesh out their team. I think they're taking a little bit of a flyer on Andre here to see if they can capture anything there. Um, I didn't really like their off season. I didn't like really the fact they were pretty quiet here. There was a lot of chatter about Brad Marchand maybe going to LA, and we'll talk about the Bruins and Marchand a little bit later. But maybe that didn't work because Brad probably didn't want to go out west. But we'll talk more about that. So yeah, kind of quiet for LA. I'm going to give them I don't know, C minus D plus. They did make a move. I'm going to give them a C minus. C minus. I'll be somewhat nice here for them. San Jose, a team, of course, far out of any playoff race, but building. We know exactly where they're at, right? They aren't really necessarily looking at wins and losses. They're looking at development. They're looking at getting this team to you know learn how to play and play hard. Be a hard team to play against each and every night, and they're getting better there. They do make a handful of moves. Of course, they move out Zetterland to Ottawa, and they pick up a couple of guys, Ostapchuk and Gregor, and a 2025 second round pick there. They do trade Luke Cunnin, who had been on my board, somebody I thought would move. They get a fourth round pick out of Luke Cunnin from Columbus. And then earlier on, of course, the Wallman trade, which we talked about, where they do get a first round pick. Um, Trade with Florida earlier on, Nico Sturm. They get a fourth round pick, also giving up a seventh rounder there. They do pick up Desjardins from Pittsburgh as well, a couple days prior to. And then the Vanacek trade, where Vanacek goes to Florida for San Jose. So they were fairly active. They're getting some futures here. They get some draft picks. Moving out a guy like Wallman, who that's going to clear up more cap space for them. Depending on what they want to do next year. Yeah, I mean, I think this is just fine. Let's see, yeah, Cunnin was on the end of his contract, so he may not have been coming back. So you get something for him. Zetterlund, I wonder if he's only 25 years old. Kind of curious about that one. They do get a second rounder. They do get a couple of other players here to add in. So, yeah, I think they did. I think they did okay for themselves. They were active. I wondered about Toffoli. I know he just signed there, but I was curious if he would have moved on at all. That did not happen. Um, hmm, B minus. We can give them B minus. They were active. We're not worried about wins and losses for them. I'm just gonna hit the pause button here real quick. All right, moving over to Seattle. Disappointing year for Seattle, I would say. Let's just pull them up here. Come on, computer. Sorry about that, guys. You go away. There. Now we should be good. No, we're still not good. Come on. Love the internet. Love the internet. So for Seattle, Sprague going out the door, going to New Jersey. They pick up a seventh round pick for him. Of course, they picked him up as a free agent. So just kind of moving off of him. They do trade Brandon Tanev earlier in the day to Winnipeg. pick up a second rounder for him. So I think pretty good get for a guy on an expiring contract, 33 years old. Um, but then, of course, the big trade they had made with Tampa, moving Bjorkstrand and it was Gordy, Yanni Gord. And they pick up a whole bunch of things here. A couple of first round draft picks, a second round pick. They get AC Mont back in return. So a really, really good haul. And they also get Kyle Akon, defenseman, 22-year-old defenseman, in that three-team deal that involved Detroit. So yeah, really like that trade for them. They're not going anyplace this year. They know that. They have to retool this thing a little bit. And, some of the players they're moving off of, yeah, I have no problem, with that. Couple of first round picks. So I really like that a lot. Get a second rounder for Tana. So they're building futures, doing what they should do. Um, Gonna give them an A- on that. I like getting the two first round draft picks there. A- for Seattle. Next up is Vancouver. Go to Vancouver and see what we got here, everybody. Very interesting team this year. Team obviously dealing with all sorts of injuries. Disappointing year for them so far. Of course, they had made the JT Miller trade, a while back. We won't talk about that one. They get a third round pick out of the New York Rangers for Carson Susie. Still has a year left on his contract. Um, that was really the only activity that they had. There was a whole lot of talk about, Pedersen and does Pedersen move on? Can they find someone for him before his no trade clause kicks in? Don't really know what they're doing. They were very quiet, not very active. Um, Still kind of right around that wild card bit, but with the injuries they're dealing with, and you just wonder about what's that room like right now? What's that dressing room like? I figured they'd be a little more active. Maybe just kind of changing some pieces out, trying to keep their wild card hopes alive. Um, I'm giving them a D. D. I'm gonna give them a D. Yeah, wasn't really impressed with Vancouver and Vegas. Of course, Vegas always active at the deadline. We know, of course, Riley Smith came over earlier, a couple days before the deadline. So reuniting with a team that he won a Stanley Cup with. Um, they give up Brendan Brisson and a third round draft pick in 2025 to bring Riley Smith over. Um, Yeah, not a whole lot else there. This is another spot where I thought Brad Marchand could end up. Uh, Bruce Cassidy there. He seemed like he would have just been one heck of a fit. Again, wanted to stay east by all indications. So he, Riley's their big take. Listen, they made some big time moves last year. They have a very solid team. Team that didn't really have to do much this time around. And let's be honest, they're kind of out of assets and resources to trade where they've just been going all in all these years in a row and spending right to the cap. And they're a pretty loaded team. And I think Riley is going to fit in, of course, just fine there. Yeah, probably they were in on some other things, but just didn't happen. I'm going to give him a C. I'm going to give him a C. I like the Riley Smith deal, but you don't see anything else going on there. Let's move over to the Central Division now. I talk about the Chicago Blackhawks. Do, do, do. So let's see. Darn pop up. So they make a trade with Utah yesterday. They give up a 2026 fifth round pick to get Shea Weber, his contract. Um, uh, and Victor Soderstrom. Earlier on, they trade Craig Smith and Peter Mrazek for Joseph Valeno with the Detroit. And on March 1st, of course, was the big one, the Seth Jones trade. I really like this trade for Chicago. They get the first round pick. They get a good young goaltender in Spencer Knight, who can be kind of their bell cow, goaltender. I think for future. I like that, but I expected them again to be more active. I wondered about Bertuzzi and Alec Martinez and a few other veteran guys they had there, Patty Maroon. Um, yeah, just really thought they'd be more active, but they got some of their work done. They do move up Mrazek and Smith. Get that Villano's only 25 years old, has another year on his contract. So, they do some things. Really like that trade though that they made with Florida, and I think it's a trade that really helps both teams. Because of that Jones, I think I'm gonna give him a B minus. B minus for Chicago. Colorado, because I'm wearing a Colorado hat. Loved what Colorado did here, everybody. They hit some home runs, and they got some guys that were high on people's lists, and what they have now down the middle, going into the playoffs is pretty remarkable. Pretty remarkable. Of course, the last trade that kind of sneaks in before we talk about the big ones is Eric Johnson coming back to the team from the Philadelphia Flyers. They give up Giovanni Smith, goes back to Philly. Of course, we know later in the day, Charlie Coyle from the Boston Bruins heads to Colorado with a 2026 fifth-round pick for Casey Middlestat, who they had just traded for almost 365 days before. Uh, Second round pick goes back to Boston, and William Zellers, youngster there, goes back to Boston. Love that move for Colorado. I'm a huge Charlie Coyle fan. I think he's going to fit in perfectly. He's going to be slotted in where he should be on a third line. That's where he belongs. He elevated last year in Boston, had a career year. Give him all the props in the world. He was a big reason why Boston was so good and didn't have that fall off last year. This year's been a struggle, but it's been a struggle for so many players in Boston. You can't really hold him accountable. You had to hold him somewhat accountable, but not to the full extent. I think he's going to fit in smashingly well in Colorado. I'm really looking forward to seeing what that looks like on the ice. And of course, the big trade they make is getting Brock Nelson from the New York Islanders, along with William Defoe. Cal Ritchie, big time prospect, goes back. Of course, we already talked about Sillington, who then got moved to Anaheim. First round and a third round pick going back to the Islanders. So you pay a pretty price, but you're going for it. You're going for it again. And Brock Nelson was high on a lot of people's lists. Another guy that I think he's going to probably slot in on a second line for Colorado, but can do a little bit of everything. Another veteran guy who I think is going to fit into that dressing room. Just like they got two really high end, high quality, um, centers who are going to add a lot both on and off the ice from both a play perspective and a cultural perspective. I really like that. And it's a Colorado team, I think, that has a pretty good culture to begin with. Yeah, you give up a lot. I mean, Boston, I think, got a haul in that deal. We'll talk about that from the Boston perspective later. And he gave up a haul for Brock Nelson. But if you're going all in for it, you went out and you addressed some major needs you had. You need to increase your center depth. Um, I'm gonna go an A here, even though they gave up a lot to do it. I mean, I think this is what they're trying to do. So A for the Avalanche. Dallas Stars, of course, they made big waves in this deadline as well. Um, just pull up all the details. Of course, they have the big trade that happens with the Carolina Hurricanes with Rantanen coming in, taking advantage of maybe a Carolina mistake. They do have to give up Stankoven. They do give up two first round picks, two third round draft picks. So just, I mean, a big time haul for Carolina here. But you get your guy and you get him signed. That was a big part of the deal happening. They had to get the extension signed, so they've got him locked up. 9.25 million. What is that? 8 years? It's an 8-year contract, I think. 7 or 8 years. I think it's a $96 million contract. So yeah, that would be 8 years. Think he's going to fit well. Again, I think he's one of these guys that would fit in well on a lot of teams, and this just makes Dallas maybe the favorite in the West, in my opinion. They were already my top choice going into the season. You add a guy like that, you give up a king's ransom. So, this better work, this better fit. I think it will. He's going in playing with other high end offensive players. He's making the choice to sign there, so it's a little bit more in his control this time. We'll talk about Carolina here in a little bit, but you just wonder, why would you make that trade if you didn't really have much indication, that he didn't want to be there and wouldn't sign there? But for Dallas, I love it. It really kind of exactly what they needed. Of course, they made some trades early on back in February, but this is really the big splash they make. You give up a lot for it. You were already so good. I'm gonna give it an A minus just because I do think you gave up a ton, but I do like the move, obviously, for Dallas Stars. A minus for Dallas. Move over to Minnesota Wild. Team, of course, with not a ton of money to spend this year. That's going to open up for these guys next year, where some of those, kind of retained salaries are going to fall off the books dramatically next year. They're still going to retain some from those old contracts, but the number goes down big time. Let's see, they do have a trade. Reese Johnson goes to Toronto. They do get those all future considerations. They do get Justin Brazeau from the Boston Bruins. They give a Blauko going back to Boston, a 26 sixth-round pick, um, and Hustadinov, 22-year-old center who did play tonight for Boston. Actually, looked pretty good. Looked pretty good. So don't know a lot about the kid, but listen, Brazeau, a name that we know here very well in the Portland area, played for the Maine Mariners, came up through the system, hardworking guy. I love his size. He's got sneaky finish for a big guy. He doesn't play as big as his body is. He's not like a super physical player, but skates better than you would expect and finishes better than you would expect. Um, yeah, I don't know what difference he's going to make in Minnesota. I mean, he's going to add to maybe their third line. His game really fell off the last few weeks. He kind of seemed to fall out of favor with the coaching staff here. Seemed to have started, some mental mistakes start to creep into his game a little bit. So maybe this will be a little bit of a wake up call that he's moving on, but moving to a team fighting for a playoffs. You hope he can find that scoring touch that he had earlier this year. Um, and I think Boston does a really good job in this trade. I think you give up a lot if you're Minnesota for Brazo, kind of a hope play. Earlier on, of course, you also pick up uh, UMaine Black Bear Gustav Nyquist from the Nashville Predators, of course, returning to Minnesota. You give up a second round pick there. Yeah, that was kind of those are the two big moves they had. Nyquist, I like. Again, he's 35, he's getting up there, but you add a couple of depth forwards for your team. Of course, you're dealing with some injuries. Um, like the moves, again, they're limited. When you understand the context of how limited they are with their salary cap, I think they did probably the best they could. I'm going to give it a C. I'm going to give it a C. Yeah, C. And Nashville, one of the most disappointing teams this year. I did not have them, winning a Stanley Cup or anything like that, but I had them, squarely in the playoffs. And just what a disaster! What a disaster this has been um, for the Preds. They are one of those teams that, if you are a Bruins fan, you're looking at them as a team that started to sell off last year, still made the playoffs. Something I think a team like Boston is hoping they can do and mimic that. But then they go out and make all the moves they did July 1, and here they are. Some moves for them on the day. They do move Mark Janikowski to Carolina, picking up a fifth round draft pick there. They do move Luke Shen and Thomas Novak off to Pittsburgh for Michael Bunting and a future fourth round selection. Of course, the Nyquist trade we just talked about. Pick up a second for him. Do like that bit. Um, let's see. That's kind of it. Kind of expecting more from them. Um, Can't say I'm crazy about the Shen Novak deal. I mean, Novak's still only 27. You have a couple years of control over him, and Shen's just a very solid defenseman. You have another year of control over him too. Um, Never been a big Michael Bunting fan, and you get the fourth round pick. Don't love the deal for Nashville, if I'm being honest. Um, so I mean, yeah, you get a second rounder for Nyquist. That's fine. Um, And I would have expected again them to be more active. I think Ryan O'Reilly had been talked about. I think Toronto had talked about him. But yeah, just expected again a little bit more of them. They're going to get a D out of me for this effort. D, D, D. And now we move to the St. Louis Blues. Of course, we've got nothing but Jack Adam Award winners on that bench from the Boston Bruins. Of course, Claude Julien as an assistant and Jim Montgomery over there as well. Let's take a look at St. Louis. So yeah, not real active at all. That's what I kind of remembered. Kind of remember them not really popping up on the news. Bennington was one player that was talked about. The goalie market thing didn't really happen. Gibson, of course, was hurt, didn't move. We wondered if, like in Edmonton, there was a lot of talk about Bennington to Edmonton. That clearly didn't happen. He's played so well lately, played great in the Four Nations. Kind of expected some things there. St. Louis has just kind of been in a weird holding pattern right now. Got a great GM. He knows what he's doing. So if they weren't very active, they didn't go out and you know, blow things up. They didn't go out and try to add because they've been right around that wild card space too. They kind of do a little bit of nothing. I'm gonna say C minus because I feel like you could have done something on such an active day and have the GM you have to not do anything. But again, sometimes you don't have a dance partner. And maybe the asking price or what Edmonton would be willing to give up for Bennington just wasn't there. And hey, you sometimes draw a line in the sand. Talk about the Utah Hockey Club. You make a couple of moves on the day, more kind of selling things off. We already talked about the Shea Weber piece there with Chicago. They pick up a fifth round draft pick in that one. Um, yeah, kind of it for them too, huh? Yeah, they made a trade earlier in February. Um, a team that's probably not making the playoffs this year. They've been fighting. They've been sticking close enough to kind of be considered. Yeah, a little surprised they didn't do more. But first year in Utah, they still got a bunch of young players. Um, a lot of assets there. They didn't need to go out and create more assets for themselves because they've had so many in terms of draft picks and their minor league system is full. Um, and not a lot of players who really want to sell off. So I guess I'm okay with that. I'm going to give them a C on the day. Very inactive day for Utah. Winnipeg Jets, one of the best stories in the league this season. Um, you know, Hellebuck having another Venzi season. Great to see that. They of course go out and get Brandon Tanev, pay that second round draft pick to Seattle. They do end up getting Luke Shen, who had been traded to Pittsburgh. They flip him back for a second and a fourth. So Winnipeg picking up Shen. I like that deal a lot for them. And then they did have a goalie trade with Florida where Kakinen goes to Florida and Chris Drager comes up to be a backup there for Hellebuck. So overall, um, I like the fact they didn't add a ton because the team has been cooking so well. You don't want to really hurt that room or do a whole lot to disrupt that dressing room, but you shore up your backup goaltender. You add a good defenseman in Shen, who's been there before, and we have Brandon Tanev, who kind of a depth winger, and I think will fit in well there. You don't give up a ton. You give up a second rounder, a couple second rounders, fourth rounder. You don't give up any firsts. Like you don't give up any major prospects. So kind of like what they did there. I would give them a B. I think I'm going to give them a B. I do like Shen and Tanev a lot for the playoffs. All right, the Carolina Hurricanes, guys. Any Hurricane fans out there listening, I'm really curious to know what you think about where your team is at, um, and just the whole Rantanen situation. What are your thoughts? I in a vacuum, and I guess we have to look at it both ways, right? You can look at the Dallas Carolina trade in a vacuum and say, okay, you got a heck of a deal there, trading a guy that didn't want to be there, two first round picks, two third round picks, young Stan Coven, who you have another year of control over at $814,000. Uh, really a good get for them. Um, but why do you make the deal in the first place? I mean, you give up Marty Natchez in that deal with Colorado initially. Do you like having Stankoven and all those draft picks better than Natchez? I guess if you're a Carolina fan, you have to ask yourself that. Um, you would think you would have done some more fact checking or some more have a better understanding of where Rantanen was. Would he want to stay there in Carolina? We all remember that they did this a year ago. They brought in Jake Gensel, really hoped to re-sign him. This deal had a lot of that same kind of energy around it, and you wondered, oh, are they gonna just lose Rantanen out the door again? Much like they did with Gensel. So at least this time they didn't let that happen. They understood, hey, we might have made a mistake here. This isn't gonna work out. Let's see what we can get. So I give them credit for that. There's a lot of GMs that will stick to their guns and don't want to admit a mistake. And I'm not even sure they're admitting a mistake. They just realize, hey, this isn't working. Let's not sit on it. Let's move forward. So I like the get for Rantanen. I don't like it for this year though. Obviously, these are futures, and you're a team in Carolina, right in the thick of the playoffs, um, in your window, and everybody else around you loaded up. I mean, Florida loaded up, Tampa loaded up, Toronto got better, Washington's a house. So, not really sure how this helps you for this year. They're obviously thinking more long term. So, as a whole, I guess if you say you gave up Natchez, let's just try to put this together. Gave up Natchez, Jack Drury, a second and a fourth rounder. Of course, you do get Taylor Hall as part of this with Chicago being involved. So you get Taylor Hall in there as well. Um, you get Hall, Stankoven, and all those picks for Natchez, Drury, and a couple picks. So yeah, I guess the net is probably pretty darn good. And Stankoven, I like him. I like him. So yeah, I think certainly can't give him an A in this because of just kind of how messy I think it probably got. They did rebound well. I just don't like it for this year. I think they made themselves lesser of a team this year. Um, but I'm going to give them a B minus because they didn't sit on their hands. They didn't say, they didn't let their ego get in the way. They went out and took care of it. You realize, hey, he's not going to stick around. Let's go make this all right. Columbus Blue Jackets. I'm just going to hit the pause button real quick. What a great story for the Columbus Blue Jackets this year. No question, my surprise of the season. I think it is for so many people right now. Love the Luke Cunnin trade. You just give up a fourth round draft pick. A kid I like, I think a little bit underrated. That was really the only move they made. This is all bonus money for them right now. They don't have to. They'd love to make the playoffs. They don't have to make the playoffs. It was never really an expectation. I don't really think it was in the room, or maybe it was in the room, but I don't think the fan base expected this. So you're playing with house money right now. If you get in, great. You're not going to trade any of those young guys. You got a slew of young talent. You got a good culture room. You got a great head coach. No need to go out and chase it. Right now, you add a nice piece in Cunnin, who only 27 years old. Yeah, it's a rental. Contract expires at the end of this year. I like the fact they didn't go out and try to just chase it all down. You wondered with the GM they have, guy who's been known to make deals. Um, but I like the fact they said, you know what, we're kind of a year ahead of where we should be. We're gonna take it. We're gonna run with it. Listen, I've seen them a few times this year. They're a tough team, and those young players are starting to hit. So I just like the fact that again they didn't go out and get crazy on deadline day. I'm gonna give them a B because I like the cutting deal. Philadelphia Flyers. Don't know what to make about Philly this year. Um, don't really know what to make about them. Yeah, just another kind of, I'd say, disappointing year of just kind of not really moving forward, not really moving backwards. Um, you do move off of a couple of your guys here, Scott Lawton, of course, going to Philadelphia. You're picking up a first round draft pick Nikita Grabenskin from Toronto. They also given up a couple of other draft picks, fourth and a sixth round draft pick there. And of course, the Eric Johnson trade we already talked about. You do get a third round pick there from the Kings for Kuzmenko. Um, so you do a few things there. I think it's a good get for Lawton. Of course, you're giving up that extra year at $3 million, but fills a need for Toronto. Like that deal. Again, a team I thought might be a little more active. Of course, they had made a prior deal. They're moving Farabee and Frost earlier on, but yeah, thought they'd be a little more active. But yeah, like the Lawton deal, you get a first rounder, get a young kid, um, things to build for the future. They just got to figure out what they want to. What do you want to be when you grow up, Philly? Where do you want to be? Do you want to progress this thing along? Um, yeah, I'm going to give him. I like getting that first round pick. I'm going to give him a B. And the Pittsburgh Penguins. Disappointing year. Disappointing in free agency, July 1. And I was pretty disappointed with their day yesterday. I think what the Boston Bruins did, I think, is what Pittsburgh should have done. I'm not necessarily talking Sidney Crosby, but maybe, maybe. You're just going no place fast if you're Pittsburgh. You flip some guys around here. You do pick up Connor Dewar and Connor Timmins from Toronto for a fifth rounder. You make the Glass deal with New Jersey where you get Stillman and Graham, a couple young players there. Um, Jonathan Gruden in that deal as well, going back to New Jersey. Of course, you had the Shen deal where you picked him up from Nashville, you flipped him to Winnipeg for a second and a fourth round draft pick. So you get some good stuff there going. You get a second rounder for Bavilier earlier on. Um, and you do maintain Thomas Novak. Just kind of a meddling day. I mean, I like how you were able to flip Shen. You got some things, but just I expected more. I expected them to sell off a little bit more. No Raquel movement. I mean, a lot of teams would have probably been in line for him. Not sure what happened there. I think you could have gotten something there for them. Maybe you were just late to the party and people went out and spent their money, spent their assets. You couldn't get anything. I'm giving them a D. I just think they needed to do more at the deadline. I really do. The New Jersey Devils. What a story for the New Jersey Devils. Talk about heartbreak this year. The injuries you're dealing with Jack Hughes. Um, frustrating, frustrating injury. Put him in a tough spot because you're so it happens so close to the deadline. I mean, who are you going to get to replace uh, Hughes? You're not, unless you want to swing a big deal for Rantanen, try to pull Mitch Marner out of Toronto. So they stay a little bit active. They pick up Mark McLaughlin from the Boston Bruins for Daniil Misyel. I think it's how you pronounce it. 24-year-old defenseman goes back to Boston. You do pick up Sprong for a seventh rounder there from Seattle. And then, of course, the Cody Glass trade that we just talked about. So, picking up a 25-year-old center who can be a depth center for you. Let's see, was there anything else major? Small trade with the Islanders where they move Adam Beckman for Dennis Kowalski, 27-year-old defenseman. And then, of course, the Dumoulin deal that we talked about earlier. I like that deal. Give up a young guy, give up a second rounder, but you do fill a need. This is still potentially a playoff team this year. I mean, their scoring depth is going to be a problem, and they're probably not going to go very far in the playoffs now. I mean, I had them going to the Cup this year. I had them going to the Cup final this year. I thought they were going to be fast. I thought they were going to be explosive. I thought they were going to have, better defense. Knowing they had Markstrom in net, I really liked a lot of what they had coming in, and they started the year off first 20-25 games. They were, going like gangbusters. But again, the Jack Hughes injury is going to spell them. I'm kind of thinking a C, maybe a C plus. I mean, you get a couple of things here. It just kind of again, I feel like a little bit of a holding pattern. I'm gonna give him a C plus, maybe out of sympathy for the Hughes thing. Tough one. We just take another sip of water. The New York Islanders, of course, making the big splash, moving off of Brock Nelson. A big part of that culture there. Let's just pull up their day. They got a big haul. They got a big haul for Nelson. Of course, there were a lot of teams in line for his services. Just pull it up here. Yeah, you move Nelson into four. You get the young kid Richie, first round pick, third round pick. So really like that deal a lot. That's really the big move they made. Another team I thought would be more active, but nice to see them getting some assets there. Thinking a B minus. I'm going to say B minus because I expected them to do a little bit more, but you lose such a big part of your culture in Nelson, a big part of your identity. But this is a clear sign that they got to figure it out. They're a little bit like Pittsburgh, where they're going no place fast. Yes, they made the playoffs a year ago. I get that, but it just wasn't working. This team wasn't going to go anyplace if they happen to make the playoffs, and good on them for at least getting something there uh, for Brock Nelson. The New York Rangers. Oh boy, interesting team here. What a horrible loss today for them. I didn't watch the game, but Ottawa comes back. Of course, you're right neck and neck for that wild card, and you let Ottawa come back in that game and beat you in overtime. Just a killer if you're a Ranger fan. They were fairly active on the day. They pick up Obi Kubel from Buffalo for Eric Brandstrom. So, Kubo, who's bounced around the league a little bit at this point. You do pick up Susie for a third rounder from Vancouver. Like that deal, you have another year of control over him. And of course, we talked about the Riley Smith deal moving out. So you're kind of doing a little bit of everything here. You're picking up some assets, you're moving off some guys, but you're still adding to your room, kind of shuffling assets around a little bit. Of course, we know earlier on the lingering deal. We don't have to talk about that one out to Colorado, where you pick up a second and a fourth, a couple of players. But of course, they did their kind of work early with the JT Miller thing, and I think that's the trade that's really going to spell a lot of their season. Him and the goaltending that you have. I like the JT Miller deal for them. I like how he's fit in there. I like how he's waking the room up a little bit. They needed it. They need a little kick in the pants, so to speak. And Miller's the kind of guy to do that. And I like the fact how they didn't sell. They didn't just add. They did a little bit of everything, a little bit of both. And um, is it enough to get them in? The playoffs? Is it enough to earn that wild card spot? I don't know. They have nothing but talent on this team. Um, so I kinda liked what they did. I'm gonna say a B. No, I'm gonna say a C plus. I'm gonna say a C plus. Um, I know I just said I like a lot of what they did, but it's the New York Rangers. You wanna see them make a splash, right? You wanna see them really kinda dive in for it, but, yeah, did some things around the edges. I think the answers have to be in the room, with the players they already have there. Those guys have to wake up. You gotta get Fox healthy. You gotta get your other guys going. And I do like the JT Miller deal, but we're gonna say a C plus just for the day that they had the deadline. The Washington Capitals. Don't believe they were super busy, but I don't think they really had to be super busy on the day. What a year they have had uh, going into the season. I had them as a playoff team. I had them, I think, finishing third. Um, in the division, but a lot of people just thought this was gonna be an Ovi watch, and that was it. Just watch Ovi get the record and get close. Yeah, their big move was picking up Villiers for that second rounder, so you deal in division, you pick up a depth, centerman. You didn't have to do much, I like it. You didn't panic, you didn't try to keep up with the Joneses, like what Tampa and Florida and everybody else was doing. You just kind of stay the course. Your answers in the room. You've got great goaltending. You're getting good sound defense. You're getting depth scoring all over the place. I like Bavilier. Give up a second rounder. I'm going to say the fact they didn't panic and go nuts, and they knew they didn't have to. I'm going to say a B plus. I like the Bavilier piece, and I don't think they really had a ton of needs out. All right, and finally to the Atlantic Division. Do we have to talk about the Boston Bruins? I guess we have to. Yes, we have to. What a day for the Boston Bruins. And I do apologize for you non-Bruins fans watching this. I'm going to take a few minutes and speak to this because I was here in New England, Bruins fan myself. Yesterday was a day of the end of an era. Truth be told, really an end of an era. Brad Marchand was the last player left from the 2011 Cup team, a last real player from that culture, from the Chara, Bergeron type of days. Um, I was a little bit stunned. Actually, during the live stream, I was getting ready to sign off a little bit after 3, and then Elliot Friedman coming in, everybody else on X coming in saying, "Oh, hold on. Looks like Brad Marchand, we're hearing maybe to Florida." And I was like, of all teams, as a Bruins fan, like that's just, it's either there or Toronto. You didn't want to see either one of those spots for him. Um, I'll start with the Marchand deal. I stuck on my live stream for a little while, wanting to see the package, wanting to see the take to Florida, thinking it's got to be something pretty good that they're moving him. And it turns out to be a conditional second round pick, which of course we know could turn into a first round pick if he plays enough games in the playoffs, however it breaks down. Um, Sounds like after hearing Don Sweeney's conversation yesterday and hearing other reports that they had been in some major talks for a contract. We knew this. We knew that they had been working on it. Some reporters are saying it was term, as Sweeney kind of referenced yesterday in his presser. Now you're hearing it was maybe more of the dollars weren't there. Sounds like the Bruins had a 3-year deal on the table for him, but maybe not the money that Brad wanted. And they went out and did what they had to do. I thought once he got hurt, that was the final straw that he wasn't going to get moved. I just thought there's no way they're going to move him. Nobody's going to want to take him. How can you really make that happen? Um, but then it became clear that they had an impasse, and you know the Bruins, for right or wrong, they felt like it was the right move to move on and take the package they did. Now they also worked with Brad. I'll give them a ton of credit here because not every team has to do this, but they honored Brad a little bit. I think gave him some choice. We talked about LA, we talked about Vegas, maybe being in on Brad Marchand. And the fact he ends up in Florida, he wanted to stay east and wanted obviously to be in a position to win. It's going to make it awfully difficult watching Florida in the playoffs because as a Bruins fan, I don't cheer for them. But then you're going to see Marshy out there. It's like, that's my boy. That's my guy. Um, so it's going to be, I think a lot of Bruins fans are going to be torn about this. Um, I hate the deal. Just on paper, objectively taking my heart out of it, I don't like the deal for Boston. Um, let's just assume it's a first round pick. Let's assume it's a late pick 31, pick 32 in a first round down the road. Let's assume that. Is that really worth is it really worth it? I mean, I look at the extra 2 months you could have had to continue to negotiate with Brad and try to figure that out. Come to a meeting place where you can get it done. Have that extra window. Is that window and the potential to have him here for the next couple 3 years? Um, some people say, yeah, listen, he's old, he's 37, he's beat up. That's not great. I get that. Um, so they didn't want to overpay him. They didn't want to pay for past performance. I get that. Man, it's just such a tough one. Of all the deals Boston made yesterday, this is the one I like the least. Not just because of the player, but you trade an injured player, you were limited on where you could take him. So I guess you did the best you could given the situation. I guess you could kind of spin it that way. But I at that point say, why bother? Why bother? Let him ride out the season here. Give yourself that window of opportunity to continue to negotiate. That's what I would have done. But I am not Don Sweeney. I'm not running the Bruins. Um, hey, in 8 years from now, if that draft pick turns into a star player, then I'll eat these words. But a tough, tough day. The Bruins, a lot like the Brock Nelson thing in on the island, right? I think both fan bases are probably feeling it. Tampa went through this with Stamkos. I mean, Tampa Bay fans were beside themselves when they lost him. So listen, we have to remember this is a league that where Wayne Gretzky got traded. And so if Wayne can get traded, none of you is safe, right? Anybody can move. Um, so that was a tough one. We'll talk about Florida, of course, here in a moment. Brandon Carlo also out the door. Excuse me a moment, guys. Sorry about that. Brando out the door to Toronto. Another minor surprise. Not surprised he was traded. I was surprised it was Toronto. You get a haul for him though. I love the package Boston gets back. You get Fraser Mitten, a prospect kid that's played up in the National League this year. Looks really, really good. Couple of years left on his entry contract. You get a first rounder and a fourth rounder for Brando. Love it. Love the deal. We'll miss Brandon Carlo. He was always, in my opinion, underrated here. Um, Fans are really hard on him yeah, because he has some moments like any player does, but he's kinda like that offensive lineman in football, where he's usually doing a really good job, but you just don't notice it because he's doing his job. You only notice the mistakes oftentimes with him. He was a steady Eddie shot blocker, um, you know, bigger body, bigger build, and just a great human being, great in the community, great in the dressing room. Um, gonna be gonna be missed. I think Bruins fans are going to miss him more than they realize when they see what you've lost. I think a little bit like David Krejci. David Krejci always had a love-hate. There were a lot of fans that either loved him or hated him, and when Krejci was gone for that one year, it's like, "Oh, bleep. We need him back. We need him back." And I think you're gonna see a little bit of that with Carlo. Yes, they're all replaceable, right? You're gonna go out and rehash this defense a little bit. You're gonna add to the room if you're Boston. But man, just in terms of the take on paper, I love it. Mitten turn into a big time player, in my opinion, and love getting that first round pick. Of course, we already talked about Marshy to Florida. We already talked about the McLaughlin deal with New Jersey. McLaughlin, local kid, had a couple spot stints here in Boston, didn't really work out. So wish him all the best going to New Jersey. They do pick up Yuri Haru from Buffalo. He did play today, so that was good to see. He might be part of that future. Again, expiring contract, so we'll see what happens with him. And then the other big trade, Charlie Coyle, in a 2026 fifth round draft pick, heading to Colorado for Casey Middlestad, 25 second, and William Zellers. Of course, we talked about this with the Avalanche. Love the deal for the Avs. Love their day. And I love this for Boston too. Again, hate losing him, but between Coyle at 5.25 and let me just get back to Carlo. Yeah, 2 more years at 4.1. I mean, that's nine, carry the one, 9.3, 9.325, something like that. That's almost $10 million of cap space that you've essentially opened up. Now, some of that with Middlestat, I guess you have to take his money into account. So let me take all that back. I just saw Middlestat's number at 5.75, so never mind. So you don't really gain any cap space in this deal. Um, but I like Middlestat. He didn't work out in Colorado. This will be his third stop. He's 26 years old. Did get an assist today. I know he had a penalty right out of the gate in this game today. But you get the second rounder, Zeller, another young kid, building up the storeroom again if you're Boston. Charlie's another one you're going to just miss. Big part of the culture here, big community guy, and had such a great year last year. It's just been such a great center for you and a great person. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think the get was really good here for Boston. You get a player that can play today, and you get a couple futures that you're absolutely going to need. So when I look at this for Boston in terms of a grade, um, it would be maybe an A, but I don't like the Brad piece of it. I'm gonna say a B. I'm gonna say a B, because I just don't like how you handle the Marchand thing. Could have been, I think, a lot better. Let's move on now, and I could sit here and talk Boston all day, but I know that other fan bases won't wanna listen to all that, and there's plenty of other people out there talking Boston Bruins right now. So, of course, we just talked about the Yuri Haru deal with Boston and Buffalo. They pick up a fourth round pick from Boston. They also traded Kubel for Eric Brandstrom with the Rangers. Their big deal, of course, is picking up Josh Norris and Jacob Bernard Docker for Dylan Cousins and Dennis Gilbert. And a second round draft pick goes to Ottawa. So they give up a second rounder in the deal. Don't like the deal. Norris is a good player. We know that. Injured a lot. We know that. Um, yeah, we know that it wasn't working for Cousins, and nothing's working in Buffalo for anybody. But I just have a fear that Dylan's going to get out of Buffalo, and much like a lot of other Buffalo players, he's going to explode, and he's going to kind of realize his potential. And you give up a second round pick in this deal too. I mean, you lost the deal. I think if you're Buffalo, yes, you got something for him, but you didn't have to move him. You didn't have to move Dylan Cousins. Um, Beyond that, I just thought there were a whole lot of other things you could have done on the day, and you didn't. You were very inactive. Um, you don't get the better player in the deal, and you give up a draft pick, and you don't really make any other major moves to get the fourth rounder from Boston for Yui Haru. But that's it. That's it. That's all you do. I do wonder if this is management saying or ownership saying we got to get rid of this GM. Don't do anything. We'll take care of this ourselves. But they do let him make the Cousins deal. Sorry, Buffalo. Much like your season, giving you an F. Only F on the board so far. Just don't like the deal at all, and just don't like your day. Detroit, Detroit Red Wings fighting for that playoff spot, fighting to get in after all these years. They have some activity, of course. We talked earlier about the Mrazek and Smith deal with Chicago. There's some depth there. You get a backup goaltender for yourself. Now they were part of the Tampa Seattle deal. They pick up a fourth rounder there as part of that. And the Huso deal that we talked about with Anaheim getting future considerations. That was about it. Um, Very, very quiet. Wasn't really sure what to expect from them. Yeah, kind of thought maybe you'd, you know, try to see them, be in on somebody to add to their room. I feel like they must just be thinking, at least for now, if we're going to make it, we're going to make it with the group we have. Um, yeah, I wasn't really blown away by anything they did. Just kind of stayed the course. I'm gonna give you, ah, do I give you a D plus? Do I do that to you guys? I mean, because Mrazek and Craig Smith just don't blow me out of the water. Um, I think you probably could have picked up something else here along the way, just for the day, not for your season, but for your day. You're getting a D plus. Sorry, guys, man. This might be part of your guys' plan, but that didn't hit well. Move over to the Florida Panthers. Big time winners yesterday. Um, Love, love, love. Yeah, taking off my Boston Bruins hat, of course. Love what they did yesterday. You give up, yeah, maybe a first round pick to get an all-star caliber, you know, winger in Brown Marchand who has tons of playoff experience, tons of leadership experience. Um, it's a throwaway pick end of the day if you're Florida. You're in it right now to win. Yes, Brad is not healthy. He is older and it is expiring contract, so there's no guarantee he stays there. Um, and forget about. I know Boston fans already been coming at me and say, "Oh, we can, just sign there next year and go back to Boston and everything's all good and happy." And that rarely happens. Remember with the Red Sox, it was John Lester, and when the Red Sox traded him to Oakland, and that was all the chatter. Oh, let's go lease Oakland in this deal, and then we'll just sign him in the offseason. And no, didn't happen. It goes to Chicago. Um, I doubt you see Marshy back in Boston. Maybe he goes home to play in Canada someplace to finish out his career, and maybe Sweeney can pull something off. I'd love to see him back there, but anyway, let's go back to Florida. Love this for Florida. He is going to fit in so perfect with that culture, with the style that they play. This is going to bring him back to being a fourth line guy early on in his days in Boston. And yeah, he can play second line for this team. He'll be able to play third line. You've got stars up and down that roster. And if Matty Kachuk can come back and be healthy, this is a house of a team. Between that, Seth Jones, of course, you kind of shore up your backup goaltending. Um, you pick up Nico Sturm, kind of a sneaky move there, kind of a depth centerman. Yeah, Vanacek, of course. Lot of things to like here. You fleeced Boston in this deal. If we're just talking about on its face for this year, um, yeah, I'm giving you an A. I'm giving you an A. Uh, Love it for them. Uh, and you might even make some Boston Bruin fans buy some of your gear, which is ridiculous. Montreal Canadiens, team that was not very active on the day, and good for them. And I'm going to say that because they didn't have to be. They did not have to be very active, nor should they be. They're in a build mode right now. They're building the future. Um, they have tons of assets. They don't need any more futures, you know, and they're starting to play well. They're around the wild card space too right now. They're in that group of teams in the East fighting. Um, but I'm really happy that they didn't go out and blow anything up or trade. I mean, Armia was talked about. Evans, of course, was talked about. He signs the contract to stick around. Um, I love the fact that they just, held the course, um, and didn't do anything. So I'm gonna give them an A minus just for fighting the temptation, fighting the temptation. A minus for them. Yeah, funny to, um, it's like getting a good grade just for showing up to school, right? So, Ottawa, of course, we've already talked a lot about Ottawa throughout here as we're getting close to the end of the board. Um, Love the Cousins deal for them. I think they hit a home run with it. I would love to see Cousins explode for that team. Love the Zetterlund deal too. You give up a second rounder. You give up Noah Gregor. The other kid you give up to the San Jose Sharks, Zach Austin Chuck. Don't know a lot about him to be honest, but Zetterlund's going to fit in well. Cousins is going to fit in well. Dennis Gilbert, sneaky, good defenseman there for them. Um, Love it for them, and they pulled a huge win today against the Rangers. Now with and I say Boston's out of it, they're only 2 points out still, but if Boston doesn't make it in, it's gonna be hard for me not to cheer for this Ottawa team, especially with, Allmark up there and seeing this deal, and I'd love to see this work out for Cousins. I would. He's a great player, and, it would just be another player in a long line of players that leaves Buffalo to go and have greater success. Um, yeah, I'm gonna give them an A as well. Gonna give them an A as well. I think they did a great job for themselves. They do. Looking outside of Buffalo and Detroit, a lot of high marks here so far for the the Atlantic Division. Tampa Bay, and then we'll finish up with Toronto. Go down to Tampa, very active. Not surprising, right? Making the big deal with Seattle. Yanni Gord coming back. Bjorkstrand coming in. Um, Moving out again. Not a lot of draft capital again. Not sure I love that for a team that is starting to age, but still feeling like they're in that window, right? The window kind of maybe opened up a little bit. You lose Stammer, of course, in the offseason. Um, yeah, you make the Gord deal. It's really your big one here for the team. Yeah, a couple other little things earlier on, but um, kind of played an uninspiring hockey tonight. They lose 4-0 to that Boston Bruins team. Didn't look. I don't know if I say they didn't look interested in playing, but maybe they took Boston a little for granted, thinking this team's not going to have anything going for themselves. So I just don't like how much you gave up to Seattle, but I do like the fact you're going for it. You bring in a player who another player that should fit here. I'd wanna give it a more like a B plus, but I think I'm gonna give it more like a B minus just because I think you probably overpaid a little bit, and I listen, you have to overpay, right, for the most part, but I'm gonna give you a B minus. And then last on the board, the Toronto Maple Leafs. During my live stream, I was actually saying how I was at, looking at it from a Toronto perspective, happy that they weren't terribly active because their team has been playing so well this year. Not a ton of needs on this team, more of having to flesh things out. You get Brandon Carlo though. You pick him up to really, fill out your back end there on your blue line. You give up a haul. You give up a lot. I know they don't care about that right now. They don't care about Mitten and the first round pick you give up. Um, and you give up another first rounder and another prospect for Lawton. So you pay a hefty, hefty price to go out and get two veteran guys that fill some spots, fill some needs for you. The East is just going to be crazy between Florida, Toronto, Tampa, Washington. I think those are really your four teams in the East I really give a shot to. And this might be Toronto's best chance at it. It just might be, and that's probably why you pay the price you do. Um, yeah, I'm kind of thinking a little bit like Tampa, kind of a B minus here for them as well. Like the moves, didn't think they had to do a lot, but you do pay a lot for it. So a little bit like Tampa. So let's just look at this now. Let's see. We have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven A's. Only one F. A lot of B's in there. A lot of C's. Um, let's see. No A grades in the Metro. Only division without any A grades. Um, Yeah, but there we are. There's the board. A little bit longer podcast today. Wasn't expecting to go this long, but did feel like it was such an active day. And knowing my live stream was so just crap with the audio, I want to at least come in and highlight some of this from each 32 team perspective and give my take. I think this is just going to set up so great for the playoffs. Just as a hockey fan, I am so excited for this playoff. I think it's going to be amazing. Must watch TV. The West is going to be wild. It is going to be wild to see how they've loaded up with Colorado, with Dallas. Vegas is obviously still really good. Yes, and of course the Jets having the great. This is just going to be a lot of fun. I'd love to see a Colorado Dallas just to see Rantanen go up against his former boys. What a show that could be. And that Atlantic Division and what happens there and in the East is going to be really wild to watch. Seeing Marchand in a Florida sweater, I kind of threw up in my mouth a little bit saying that, but it's the new reality. Carlo up in Toronto is just going to be wild. Gonna be a lot of fun, guys. I can't wait for it. I'm gonna be back on with you guys on Monday night. Going to have ECHL off ice official Regan Sweeney will be joining the show. I'm going to talk about just his role with the ECHL, the life of an off ice official, and we'll probably talk a little bit NHL as well, and probably talk a little bit about the Maine Mariners too, who unfortunately do lose to the Reading Royals tonight. And of course, later on this week, I'll have a Mariners kind of week in review as we're getting closer and closer to the end of that ECHL season. Playoffs not looking great for them either. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed the trade deadline day and all the activity, all the excitement there. Hope you're enjoying the weekend. Thank you so much for watching. If you do like what you're hearing, please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button down below. Definitely appreciate that. And until next time, everybody, be kind, show love, and God bless.